I am Sergeant Major Jack Saunders, your host for this issue of The Big Picture. 1966 was a critical year for the United States Army, a year that saw a major combat force deployed to the Far East to implement our government's support of a free South Vietnam. On your Army reports today, we bring you some of the personalities and events of 1966 that made Army history, that gave new inspiration to the American fighting man and new meaning to the high principle of justice which he defends.
This is Edelbruck, Luxembourg, a quaint European city made famous in World War II by an American soldier. Each year, a ceremony is held honoring the memory of General George S. Patton, Jr., who launched an historic attack from this region in the critical Battle of the Bulge in 1944. This is Edelbruck's 21st Annual Remembrance Day, honoring General Patton's contribution to World War II victory. As part of the observance, United States Army skydivers demonstrate parachuting skills which play an important part in airborne techniques. Helicopters are employed in staging a mock air assault. In today's Army, the emphasis on speedily deployed combat troops recalls General Patton's military faith in the swiftly moving armored forces of World War II. At the ceremonies, representatives from Luxembourg and the United States are on hand to pay tribute to the memory of the dynamic American general. The mayor of Edelbruck greets the assemblage of distinguished visitors. United States Ambassador to Luxembourg, Mrs. Patricia Roberts Harris, is among the major speakers. Highlights of Patton's career are described for the large audience attending the ceremony. General Patton was chosen to command the Army force in Operation Torch, the landing of American troops in North Africa, which marked our entry into combat against the Nazis. High-ranking U.S. Army officers praised General Patton's unique ability to organize and lead his men. American forces and troops of 7 allied nations take part in a colorful parade, one of the high points in the observance. At the Patton Memorial, a ceremony for a brilliant soldier whose individual ways often made him a controversial figure. But in the battle for a free world, he knew only one direction: forward. General Patton's dedicated Army career remains an inspiration to today's fighting man who also moves forward on the path to freedom. In a colorful ceremony on the Pentagon Mall in Washington, D.C., Sergeant Major William O. Wooldridge is sworn into the newly created position of Sergeant Major of the Army. The appointment of a non-commissioned officer to serve as consultant to the Army Chief of Staff on matters concerning enlisted men is designed to stimulate pride and promote confidence among enlisted personnel. Army Chief of Staff General Harold K. Johnson, who selected Sergeant Major Wooldridge from among thousands of senior non-commissioned officers, administers the oath of office to the 43-year-old, much-decorated veteran of World War II and Vietnam. In addition to the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Army, other distinguished guests participate, along with ceremonial Old Guard troops from the 3rd Infantry. Mrs. Wooldridge assists in pinning the new insignia on her husband, who after 25 years of service becomes the first NCO to hold the official position of Sergeant Major of the United States Army. Having assumed his new office, Wooldridge makes a trip to Brownwood, Texas, to be guest of honor of the town he left as a young man 25 years before. Family and friends are on hand to greet him. Local and state officials proclaim September 28, 1966, as William O. Wooldridge Day. Congratulations are extended to the Sergeant Major as a dedicated soldier who has honored his hometown and his nation. At the Brownwood Coliseum, members of the Chamber of Commerce and various civic organizations join in a warm reception for their guest. The American Legion and other military service organizations present him with honorary membership, symbolizing the spirit of the American fighting man, which Wooldridge so ably represents. The luncheon is literally topped off with presentation of a typical Texas hat, adding an informal note to the day's ceremonial. During the afternoon at the Army Brook Medical Center, the Sergeant Major signs in for a visit with some of the men who have been wounded in Vietnam. Wooldridge's understanding of the enlisted men and his sympathy for their problems makes him an ideal choice as their representative to the Chief of Staff. The day's busy schedule includes a parade through Brownwood's main streets, led by the distinguished visitors. Elements of the Texas National Guard take part in the festivities. The local band utilizes a unique form of transport and a play-as-you-go style. Latest weapons are featured in an impressive display of Army firepower. At the MacArthur Academy of Freedom, named in honor of a famous American military leader, a retreat ceremony is observed by the Sergeant Major. From Brownwood, Texas, it's welcome home to Bill Wooldridge, who serves in the finest traditions of the United States Army. President Johnson lands at Fort Campbell, Kentucky for a visit with elements of the 101st Airborne Division. He is greeted by Division Commander Major General Benjamin Sternberg. Despite bad weather on his arrival, the President inspects the honor guard assembled to receive him. Scheduled for the Chief is a first-hand explanation on the workings of one of the 101st Airborne helicopters. The presidential party has two other distinguished visitors, Army Chief of Staff General Johnson and Sergeant Major of the Army Wooldridge. A tour of the camp includes a view of communist weapons captured in Vietnam, grim evidence of the jungle war. Hidden stores of Viet Cong weapons and ammunition are often discovered in caves and tunnels by U.S. troops on search and destroy missions. One of the features of the exhibit of captured enemy equipment is a dummy dressed in the uniform of the Viet Cong. In a Fort Campbell testing area, the President observes a demonstration of air assault techniques which are being used by our forces in Vietnam. The lack of roads and rail facilities in the dense interior of South Vietnam has emphasized heavy use of Army aircraft in moving troops and equipment. Army training programs stress deployment by air of combat groups. The impressive demonstration reassures the President that these airborne soldiers are superbly trained professionals, experts in the most modern combat techniques. Following the demonstrations, an address to the troops and their families and friends, affirmation of United States policy in Vietnam, and the President's own deep conviction that small nations must be allowed to determine their own way of life unhampered by aggression. Afterwards, the presidential party, including Mrs. Johnson and daughter Lucy, greets some of the men of the 101st who have fought in Vietnam. Behind them is a tradition of courage forged in the snows of Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne Division earned its place in history in a heroic battle against the Nazis. A day of meaning for the Commander-in-Chief and for the men who carry on this tradition of our nation's great freedom fighters.
But the Army year 1966 is a year not only of remembrance and dedication, but of action, of men training for battle, of combat in the eternal twilight of the Vietnamese jungle, of that indomitable spirit in the American fighting man which persists no matter what the obstacle.
No, this is not a ballet school, and these men are definitely not dancers. They are learning the grim art of hand-to-hand combat at the United States Army Jungle Training School in the Canal Zone. With the increasing commitment of American troops in Vietnam, orientation in jungle fighting has become a vital part of the Army's training program. Students are familiarized with the hazards of the jungle environment and learn what to do about animals and snakes. Here's one jungle enemy that requires very special handling. A course in weapons, mines, and traps includes demonstrations of various kinds of devices employed by the enemy to impede the advance of our troops. Survival in the jungle war often depends on the ability of the soldier to recognize enemy camouflage which may conceal dangerous hazards. One of the perils of jungle fighting is walking into an enemy trap. Classes are held in ambush and countering techniques. These are followed by field tests during which the soldiers are exposed to a simulated ambush. instructor is dressed up as an Asiatic guerrilla fighter. He will conceal himself in the brush in a test of the swiftness of the student soldiers' response to enemy surprise attacks. It's all part of a special course designed to sharpen the jungle soldiers' reaction to the ambush situation. Another important phase of training at the Jungle School is a day navigation course, which will help point the way through dense interior jungle. This calls for considerable skill in map and compass reading. Moving forward in the jungle may often mean moving up, and a little mountain climbing training is very much in order. The jungle soldier must be expert in maneuvering on the most difficult terrain, and he learns to scale the high places using whatever means are at hand. Many of the instructors at the school have had combat experience in Vietnam and pass along their first-hand knowledge to the students. Much important combat intelligence is obtained from the capture and search of prisoners. Techniques of handling captured enemy soldiers or agents are learned in realistic field problems. Combat teams learn how to make river crossings in assault boats in a problem-stressing attack via waterways. There isn't always a boat available. In that case, the soldier takes a ride down the rope traverse. Sometimes our combat troops in Vietnam encounter a seemingly deserted village which may conceal enemy fighters. A mock-up of a Vietnamese village provides an effective facility for training in search and destroy missions. These missions often turn up collaborators who have been giving aid to the Viet Cong. All instruction is aimed at giving the U.S. soldier as complete an experience as possible to prepare him for jungle combat. Graduation time. The men who've made it, all volunteers selected from many different Army units, receive congratulations from Major General J.D. Alger, who heads up the United States Army Forces Southern Command. Each man has earned his diploma the hard way, but because of his rigorous training at the Army Jungle School, he will be a better soldier, better able to carry out the difficult assignment of jungle warfare. At the 101st Airborne Brigade Forward Base Camp in Vietnam, a guest from the entertainment world brings a touch of home to U.S. soldiers. Actor John Wayne, on a USO tour of our military camps, stops off for a brief visit with the airborne men who are enjoying a well-earned rest after having completed Operation Hawthorne, an important 101st combat assignment. It's a wet day for signing autographs, but Actor Wayne is lucky enough to have one of those pens that writes underwater. No, John, that gun isn't a studio prop, so better watch that famous trigger finger. The actor serves as a reminder of stateside to our fighting men in far-off Vietnam. With clearing weather later in the day, a victory festival is held to celebrate the success of Operation Hawthorne. Local entertainment is provided by girls from the village who perform a native dance for the soldiers of the brigade. Garlands for the brave in the name of the free people of South Vietnam. A U.S. patrol returns to camp. The reception by the Vietnamese welcoming committee is warm, but the drinks are cool, a combination that hits the spot with these weary combat troops. While one American force celebrates victory, another is deeply engaged in combat in Vietnam's Central Highlands. Elements of the 25th Infantry Division launch Operation Paul Revere, a strategic move aimed at preventing the Viet Cong from infiltrating into South Vietnam. Artillery is moved by air to positions from which a fire mission will be carried out to clear an area where troop and supply carriers